I really appreciate the opportunity to come, I guess, talk to y'all, and because this segment, this crossroads between industry and technology is an area that's near and dear to my heart. As Trent said, I started way back in the last century at Tenneco. Finance guy out of LSU, went to work for an oil company because they paid better than banks or insurance companies at the time. Picked Tenneco because they had a country club. I don't know how many of y'all remember Tenwood Country Club. You could join for $7.50 a month for a family membership. And I kid you not, 2 months after I started, they raised the rates to $15 a month. They doubled the price. 900 people quit the country club. They're all employees. $15 a month. 2 months later, 900 people rejoined because they realized it was the best deal they would ever have. And I think that probably made a list for an intelligence test. I hope nobody here quit and rejoined at Tenneco. But did that for a few years, then went to what's now IHS Energy. It was Petroleum Information at the time. Did that for a few years, and then I got a call about joining a German software company called SAP, which I think is probably the most popular software company in the world. I say that jokingly because those of you who use it know that it's not really very easy to use, but it's a good tool. We're a big customer. Did that for a few years and then decided to go into consulting. I got tired of software. Was at Deloitte, Ernst & Young, and then I had lunch with the wrong guy 3 years ago and I ended up at Apache. So my responsibility is to look after IT from a global standpoint at Apache. And so the lens I have, I think, is a little bit unique because I've seen both sides and I've seen it in a lot of different areas. And it's a tough cross-section. And so I'm not going to talk about Apache specifically and those things that Apache is doing. We'll touch on it a little bit, but just like the rest of our industry over the last 3 or 4 years, we've had to transform just because of the price of oil. I know that most of y'all have suffered through that with us. And it's taught us a lot, and it gets back to the, Lord, I just pray for, one more boom. I promise not to waste it this time. That prayer has been, prayed for generations, by the way. And things are looking a little better now, and we hope we can just take the lessons that we've learned over the last 3 or 4 years and carry them into the future. But what I am going to talk about is technology and disruption. This digital, the most overused phrase in the world today is digital transformation. The digital, insert whatever here. You've got, digital departments, chief digital officer, and nobody really knows what digital is, what cloud was. No, it's whatever, we're doing digital transformation because somebody told me once, if you're a CIO and you're not doing digital transformation, you're not relevant. And I'm clearly relevant in my own mind, so yeah, everything's digital now, I guess. Sure, we'll go with that. I want to talk about some global disruptions and kind of put a spin on it and how it relates to what we're talking about. Everybody knows these brands. What they started off doing is not what they do now. But what they started off doing disrupted their industry, and these are the survivors. There have been a lot of disruptors, and these companies left a lot of carcasses along their path. But if you look at it, Facebook started as, the MySpace replacement, right? It was for college students at first just to connect. And now if you look at it, in 12 years, they, by their definition, they connected 1.6 billion people in 12 years on a platform. Right, but that's not what they do. That's not how they make money. They make money on advertising. But this connection, Trent talked about us in the industry. And you've heard of the 7 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Everybody knows somebody who knows somebody in the analog world. It used to be 7 degrees. In the Facebook world, and this is a huge number when you think about it, almost 2 billion people are now connected by less than 3.5 other people. That's everybody. And that's down from 4, and that half is huge when you look at the law of big numbers, right? I think I agree with Trent. I think in oil and gas it's like 1.2 degrees of separation because we all live within a 20 square mile radius of each other in Houston. But that's really not even what Facebook is about. The next two kind of scare me a lot. Almost half of the users of Facebook view Facebook as their primary source of news. And you can say what you want about journalists and journalistic integrity, but the old school journalists, Washington Post, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, insert here, do have an ethos that they talk about, they'll go to jail instead of revealing their sources. And these journalists do have a level of checks and balances with their editors and those people before they'll publish news, because they want to be the ethical voice. Now you can talk about fake news and all these other things. We're not going to talk about that. But Facebook is not, they'll tell you, they're not a media company, they're not a news company, they're a platform. So they don't have to do all that, but people, if it's on Facebook, half of the users think it's news and thinks it's real. And a lot of it's not. It's opinion. And then now, and he's been in the news a lot, but Zuckerberg is advocating using their AI to define speech and to censor speech, which again has some pretty significant impacts from the global reach of this company and the impact they have on, we'd like to say on the uninformed masses, but it's not. It's on the informed masses as well. So a social media company is now the leading news outlet and one of the leading advertising outlets in the world. Apple. Apple is fascinating. They have generated more cash. They have more cash than any company in the history of companies. I don't remember the number. I can make it up, but their GDP, if they were a country, they would be like the 12th or 13th largest GDP in the world as far as the amount of cash and revenue that they generate. They are the most profitable company in the world, and they did it by constantly reinventing themselves, and their greatest innovation that they've sold to us was a cannibalization of what they had started printing money with, which was the iPhone came from the iPod. And they were told, you're crazy to discontinue this, look at the sales you've had, and now people still have iPods, I've got several of them. I can't find the chargers to charge any of them, but I still have them because one day I may find the charger, and then one day I may start running, and I can put the little clip on my shirt and not have, everybody has the relics of the past. Nowadays, the relics of the past are 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, or 4 years ago, right? But if you look at this, Nokia has essentially been put out of business by Apple. Nokia represented 70% of the equity market value of the country of Finland before the iPhone came out. And now it's almost 10%. And the thing that I did not know until relatively recently is the last bullet. Apple commands a very small percentage of the global cell phone market, and they make 80% of the profits. Because what Apple did in their innovation was they took a commodity and turned it into a luxury item. The worth of an iPhone is no greater than an Android phone or a Windows phone, but nobody pays $99 for their iPhone. How much do you pay for your iPhone? How many of you know how much you pay for your iPhone? That's the brilliance of it. For years, they hid the cost of the $1,000 phone now. So they're getting a 10x multiple. I mean, I almost said they're literally printing cash. That's not. Okay, I'll digress. A pet peeve I have, the misuse of the word literally, right? They're not literally, they're figuratively printing cash. But I was on a call one time when I was in one of my previous jobs, and a guy was talking. It was this global call. There's like 100 people. I don't know how many people are on it. This guy said, we're so busy, our people are literally being stretched too thin. And I was like, well, what do you have them doing? And what does that look like? And if somebody stretched me just a little bit, A, I'd probably be a little thinner, and B, I might be able to dunk. So if this doesn't hurt too bad, I wouldn't mind being literally stretched a little thinner. Okay, off the soapbox. That literally will be the only time I'll do that today. Then one of my favorites, Amazon. Who remembers how Amazon started? Books out of a garage in Seattle, right? Selling books, selling a commodity. And then they grew, and they disrupted, and they targeted commodity sales. And now almost half of all online sales globally go through Amazon. And they're not even allowed in China. So Alibaba is the equivalent in China. So, if you think about taking that market, it's still half of the global market, including China, and they don't get to play there. They have overtaken Google as the primary search engine to begin product searches. Not even product searches to buy, but people will start searching in Amazon. You can see the numbers there, over half the time. And then you go into the pure retail space, not the book space, but the retail space, and they're predicted that they'll have almost 20% in the next 3 years of the global retail market. That's in 10 years going from 0. And there is no larger market than the global retail market, right? And the amazing thing about Amazon is they did most of it without ever making money. I mean, even now in 2017, their total revenue was $177 billion. Their net income was $3 billion. And you say, well, I mean, that's 2% or whatever, not bad for retail, small margin company. But they made all that in AWS and in media, not in the retail space. They've convinced the market to give them almost $500 billion valuation, and they're not making money, which is the most brilliant part of the disruption. Because if you don't have to worry about necessarily making money, you can do a lot of stuff when it comes to innovation and disruption and investment, and failure means a totally different thing than it means now. And the interesting thing about it is, if you look at the valuation of retail companies over the last 15 years, Amazon, I don't remember the exact numbers, I think they look at like a 1,900% growth on their valuation. Walmart's the only other one that's in the positive, and it's like it's like 4 or 5%. Everybody else, Macy's, Penny's, all those guys are negative growth and valuation. But the interesting thing now is what Amazon is doing is Walmart's trying to become Amazon, right? Walmart's taking their brick and mortar, they're buying e-commerce companies. Amazon's taking their e-commerce company, they're buying brick and mortar. They bought Whole Foods. They didn't buy Whole Foods because they want to be in the grocery business. They got Whole Foods because they have 480 brick and mortar stores that are close to Amazon Prime customers. Because think about where Whole Foods goes. So that is just that is their next logistics last mile story, and they're disrupting that. How many people have seen the H-E-B commercials that have started coming out in the last 3 months that they'll now deliver groceries to you? You call them, they'll deliver it. That's second mover, right? They're reacting to Amazon. Now, will H-E-B be profitable? And all? Yeah, sure. But Amazon's not going after the grocery business, they're going after the brick and mortar business because they still are looking at less than a 20% market share. And so when you look at these companies, and it's really a race to the first $1 trillion valuation. Which company is going to be the first one with a valuation of $1 trillion? I don't know. I wouldn't even talk about Google, which is probably the scariest one of them all. But these companies have disrupted not only their industry, but all industries. And they did it mostly through the consumer channel. Well, we're not consumers. We're business to business. So so what about consumers? The challenge that we have is how do you deal with the next generation of buyers, the current generation of buyers and of data enterers and data consumers in this world. So if you start talking about the connections that you have, what Google is about and what Facebook is about and what Amazon is about and what Apple is about is really at its core data. It's getting the data, doing something with the data, understanding the data, and making it actionable. And the amount of data they have on all of us is frightening. And one of the most frightening things, and I'll touch on a little bit when I talk about security, is we have gotten okay in trusting everything we have personally to these companies. I was talking to a coworker of mine. We were talking about moving something to the cloud, right? And it was moving the backup stuff to the cloud. And he said, well, is the cloud secure? And I said, no. He said, what do you mean? I said, it's not secure. It is somewhat secure, but it's like your house. Is your house secure? Probably, until somebody really, really, really wants to come in. And then if somebody wants to come into my house, they're coming into my house, right? I mean, they may take a tank and drive it through the front of the house, but they'll be in the house. They could get caught. They could go to jail. There could be consequences of it. But if they want in, they can get in. It's just like anything else. If somebody wants to hack you, they will hack you. They may get caught, and you'll be protected. But I told this guy, it's not secure. And he said, well, that concerns me. I said, well, let me ask you a question. Where's your money? He said, what do you mean? I said, where's your money? I said, you have a sizable net worth. Where is your money? He's like, it's in the bank. What bank? my money's in the cloud. Yeah, your money's in the cloud. And we're perfectly fine with that, right? Because we're protected. You know, nobody cares about FDIC insurance until somebody makes a run on a bank and you realize, but that hasn't happened in our lifetime. You know, the Great Depression had happened, but it hasn't happened in our lifetime. We're insured. Credit card companies, how many of you have been hit with credit card fraud? Everybody in the room. Has it cost you money? Generally not. So we've gotten comfortable with just outsourcing that and trusting that somewhere out there people are looking out for us. Anyway, we'll get back to security in a minute. If you talk about Amazon, we want to take the Amazon model, and if you look at it, the people who buy on Amazon, myself included, you're a consumer. What are you looking at? You're looking at cost, right? What does the thing cost? And skip down, you're looking at alternatives. Is this the cheapest one? Is this the best one? Is it the prettiest one? Do I like the colors? Do I like the features? How soon can I get it here? Am I willing to pay a premium for that? Amazon Prime, you know, which is just an annuity that they have that actually makes them some money. And the one I like at the bottom, what do other people say about it? What's the rating? You know, in the economy we have now, you know, there are people that because of their Airbnb ratings can qualify for leases on apartments in New York City. If their credit is crap, but their Airbnb ratings are good, they'll get leases. You know, and people talk about Airbnb and Uber as disruptors, and they are disruptors, but not near to the scale of the companies that we've talked about. So you look at Amazon. This is how we make decisions on what we want to buy with Amazon, right? There's analogs to our world, and they're listed up there. I don't have to talk about it. You know, we look at, from an operator standpoint, you know, we are constantly looking at value. Is it about cost? Yes. It's always about cost. It's always about price, but it's about value. The same way you're looking at cost and delivery and alternatives and quality or ratings, we look at the same thing, right? The problem that we've had in the past is getting the data that allows us to do this in a fashion, in a time that will let us make different decisions and more informed decisions. And so that's why we've always defaulted to price. We've been talking about the digital oil field for 20 years or 30 years, right? And I remember back in the days of, you know, Trade Ranger and Commerce One and the big, you know, we're going to commoditize the oil field service industry. And so the oil field service, I was in the software at the time, I didn't do it to you. And so the oil field service industry, well, we're going to do OFS portal and we're going to fight the, you know, we're not commodities, we're value added and all these kind of things. You know, okay, great. We're now getting to the point where that digital oil field and all of that stuff that we talked about 20 years ago, technology's caught up to where you're actually starting to be able to do some of it. And here is one word of advice, and I'm not qualified to give you advice, but that's never stopped me in 30 years of working, so it's not going to stop me now. It's okay to be a commodity provider. If you are a commodity provider, accept it and embrace it and get good at it and get efficient at it and get transparent about it, and we'll still be happy to do business with you. But don't try to sell your commodity as a differentiated service, right? Just accept it. When I was in consulting, and I had partners, they were, you know, I was a consulting partner at EY, and I had people at EY that had been at EY, and they're born at EY, they're going to die at EY. All they've ever done is EY, and they were absolutely convinced, and this is not a knock on EY, because insert Deloitte, KPMG, Accenture, IBM, it doesn't matter. They were convinced that they were not commoditized, that they were absolutely differentiated, and therefore they could justify a 20% higher price than the consulting company that looks exactly like they look through the lens of a buyer. And they couldn't understand why they always lost. So if you're a commodity, be the best commodity service provider out there because we need them. We need you to be good and efficient at what you're doing. Okay, so anyway, if you're differentiated, differentiate yourselves. Because it's not just about cost, it's about value. It will always be partially about cost. But it's about getting the right product, the right good, the right service in the right place at the right time for the right price. And historically, our industry has been terrible at it. We're getting better, but we weren't very good. That's why we have yards everywhere. That's why we order, you know, we got to have these consumables. We can't let that rig go. We may never get another one that's as good as that one is. You know, so we've always had interesting behaviors because we haven't been able to get the data and process the data that we need to make the decisions efficiently and effectively like an Amazon does. And then overlaying on top of it, new world order. The more technology we have and the more connected we are, the more security becomes a concern. You know, when somebody comes into my role, what everybody will tell you is the only IT thing that the board cares about is cybersecurity. That's a lie, by the way. The board cares about a whole lot of IT-related things. But they absolutely care about cybersecurity at the top of the list. The funny thing was consumers don't. Target was hacked. How many millions of credit card numbers got out there? Nobody stopped, I'm saying nobody, very few people stopped going to Target because of that hack. All you gotta do is look at Target sales. They're actually doing fairly well. Because again, they weren't inconvenienced by it. The cost of that hack didn't impact me. I like Target. You know, the allergy medicine's cheap there, so I'll go get it. And more importantly, it's right by my house, right? It's a convenience buy. But we care about it. And the more connected we become with the Internet of Things, the more security becomes an issue. One of my new favorite hack stories is that there was an unnamed casino. Some of you may have heard about this. An unnamed casino that was hacked not too long ago. And the ingress was through a Wi-Fi connected thermometer in the aquarium, one of the aquariums in the lobby of the casino. Just monitoring the temperature so the fish don't die, and it was unsecure. And the hackers hit it, and it took them a while, but then they bounced into the network, brute forced their way in, wandered around for a while, and ended up with downloading out through the thermometer a lot of the high roller list of the casino. And through a thermometer. Now you think about how excited the engineers in my company are about downhole sensors and running fiber when they're drilling and having the drilling rigs and the frac vans and the tanks and the chemical vendors and all stuff, constant data all the time. And every single one of those is a thermometer in an aquarium in a casino. And security is paramount. We were in a presentation by one of the large oilfield service providers, there's probably representatives of that in this room. They were talking about some services they're going to offer, and they actually led, first slide out of the gate, cybersecurity. It wasn't about the differentiated service, it was about everything you're about to hear, we're spending a lot of time and money to make it secure, which is, telling when you think about it. So security is a top priority as we talk about this data. The interesting thing about the data also is we need data, the same data, from the same provider, viewed through different lenses, depending on what you're trying to do from an operator standpoint at Apache. We want to know how much does it cost? Are we paying what we're supposed to be paying? Are we getting what we're supposed to be getting? The guys out on the field want to make sure they're getting the right quality product so they can continue, because that product may be a small amount of money that they're spending in a larger scope, right? And then our supply chain guys want to understand the supplier side of it. If you go back to the slide with Amazon, right? So what the challenge from a technology standpoint becomes, one, we've got to get the data. And by the way, we want to own our data. A lot of times in the past, you have our data because we've never been able to do anything with it, and so we've never got it. Well, now we want it, and we're contracting differently because of that. Because we actually have contracts that say you're going to do this stuff for us, and then you get to keep the data. And if we wanted the data, we got to pay for you for the data that was generated while we paid you for the service. Which, good on you, that was brilliant. Those days are, slowly coming to an end, I think. So we have the challenge of ingesting this data, conditioning this data the right way, doing the right things with it, and then sending it out in a very timely fashion, sometimes a real-time fashion, to the consumers of the data. But the consumers of the data are different based on what their role is and what they're doing and what outcome they expect from it. So what do we got to do? We got to get the machines to help us, right? We can't do it ourselves. We can't move fast enough. So if you talk about artificial intelligence, machine learning, we'll touch on that on the next slide, which I think you'll geek out on because it's my geek slide. We've got to use the technology that's available to us to, it's along the bottom. And I don't like to put slides up and then read them, but we've got to be able to get the data in, do something with it, deliver it to those consumers that need it in a way that they can take action on it. And we've got to be able to turn that crank very, very rapidly. In the past, that crank would turn, it would be measured in weeks or months. We need it to be measured in seconds or minutes, depending on what it is. Because we've got to make those kinds of decisions in a very capital-constrained environment. Our CEO will talk about all the time, you control what you can control. As an operator, we can't control revenue. We can control half of revenue, which is production. We can't control price. And so if you look at Apache specifically, from 2014 to 2015, our production was relatively flat, and our revenue was half what it had been before. There's no other industry out there that you have to deal with that kind of fluctuation. And obviously, it has a knock-on effect to y'all. We get that. But if you can't control your top-side revenue number by having zero input on your price, then you have to control what you can control, which isn't just cost, but that's a big piece of it. It's productivity, right? You've got to look at things from an asset standpoint. And you've got to look at the return on the capital you have, because you can control that. You've got to look at your cost structures constantly. And it's all through the lens of risk. Amazon got to where Amazon is because Jeff Bezos has never been afraid to take risks. He's taken huge risks, and he has failed majestically. And every time he does, his valuation goes up. It's brilliant. I mean, it's scary, brilliant, right? Well, our industry is all about risk. You can't drill a mile down and a mile over that way without ever being able to see the operating environment that you're in and say you're risk averse. But we've got to minimize the risks that we can minimize. And so you got machines that you want to put to work for you. This is a slide that's from Bloomberg Beta, and it's one of my favorite slides because I have some very opinionated opinions. Is that repetitively redundant? I have a lot of opinions about this whole machine learning, artificial intelligence, and that's why I love the fact at the top of this slide they call it machine intelligence. Because well, never mind. I'm not going to go down that rat hole because I'll get the lasso, and we'll talk sometime offline about my views of machine learning and artificial intelligence. But what this graph is a point-in-time ecosystem of companies that provided some level of technology associated with machine learning and AI that have been funded with $10 million or more of venture capital money, right? And they're out in the ecosystem, and they're doing things. The yellow near the bottom is the industry blocks, and you can see them. And there's one noticeably missing. There's more than one missing, but there's one noticeably absent, which is anything related to energy, oil and gas, right? So there is this ecosystem, and it's larger than this. These are just the ecosystems at a point in time that had greater than $10 million in funding, and none of them are focusing on energy because we're not relevant in this space to the VC-backed, largely West Coast companies, because we've lagged from an information technology standpoint for a long time. There's one on there on the agricultural space that actually uses imagery to look at plants and determine based on, because they're making passes constantly, to determine do they need to apply pesticide or herbicide or fertilizer or water. And then the machines make those decisions and then send the signals. That was recently acquired by Deere, and they're incorporating it into their machines. Well, one, it's easy to do. Well, not easy to do. It's easier to do because you can see the plants, right? You can't see the Barnett Shale, right? And your cost of failure is not that high because if you get the pesticide a little heavy, yeah, you may overspray one row or two rows, but then you'll see and you'll correct it and you can move on. You're not spending millions of dollars down underneath. So there are reasons that our environment is lagging in some cases, but a lot of it is because that's just not the way we've done things. And I think we've got to do something about that. And at Apache, we are trying to do things about that, as are many of our peers. This is my only real Apache slide. And It's not something that you can ever hold me accountable for or say Mark said they were doing this or prove that we're not. I'm kidding, of course, for the people who watch this later from Apache. But we've been going down a digital path for a while. And it really falls into these three overarching buckets, right? We are constantly architecting and re-architecting and re-architecting our data foundation. Because the myth that a lot of people have that don't understand it fully is that open source is the world and you can just have people do code and hit a data lake, and innovation is everywhere, and it needs to be organic, and let's get beanbag chairs and clear out offices and turn Post Oak into the West Coast. When you're building an app for a consumer who is one of a billion consumers you're trying to reach, and you fail for them, who cares? Because all you're trying to get is 2% of the billion anyway to get on your app, and then you'll get a valuation, and then you'll become one of the uber rich West Coast technology guys. But one of the things I preach all the time is that the next one, standardization, is in our business, in a B2B world, standardization is foundational and required for innovation. But that's not standardization at every single level of the stack. But from a data standpoint, if your data foundation is not standard, you will spend millions of dollars more than you need to get the same outcome you can. One of the reasons that the Apple Store, there's an app for that. One of the reasons there's an app for that? Because if you build an app, you have to rigorously adhere to the standards that they put out for the app. You want to list something on Amazon, you have to rigorously comply with the standards that Amazon has, because they recognize this. So we're looking at simplifying and standardizing as much as we can at a foundational level so that we can allow our people to innovate. Because everything you build, if I don't have a standard data environment, then I can't deliver it to you quickly. And the other thing is we're connecting everywhere. We're connecting everywhere, we're connecting with everyone. Because we have to. That means internally, externally, our supply chain, our extended supply chain. I was almost said our customers, but we really don't have customers. Somebody buys our oil, nobody knows who it is. We got 15 guys in the market. That's the funniest thing when you deal with people that aren't in the industry. They come in and say, okay, tell me about your customers. I can't. What do you mean you can't? I said, well, we sell oil at a place, at a price, and I don't know who buys our oil. I honestly don't know who buys our oil. Thank you, whoever does. We should pay a premium for our oil because we're differentiated. No, it's a commodity. Never mind. Back to that. So we're connecting everywhere. Our drilling rigs, our frac vans, our completion, everything. And so to kind of move it to the second to the last slide, and to put a supply chain slant back on it, because if you look at this, start in the middle, the blue bars, digital transformation. The things that we've talked about, that has become the foundation, the underpinning of insert business function here transformation. The one sitting on top of it, supply chain. You could put finance, you could put legal, you could put IT, you could put HR, right? You could put customer, manufacturing. That blue one in the middle is the new reality on how do you foundationally allow transformation to occur. Right? Because at the end of it, and the three most important words on here to me are in the yellow, the last three words on the thin bar: enhance analytical practices. Everything that we're doing, everything that we're trying is to get the right data in the right people's hands so they can make a decision. It's not always going to be the right decision. But if they make the wrong decision, it's not going to be because they've got old data or incorrect data. And that has been one of the biggest issues in our industry for a long period of time. And part of it is our suppliers. Part of it is us. Part of it is the people that work for us, that this is the way, if it was good enough, it's like they say about, translations of the Bible. If the King James Version was good enough for the Apostle Paul, it's good enough for me. Got to think about that one for a little while. There's a history thing, like 0 at time. Okay, never mind. We'll move on from that. But it's like, this is the way I've always done things. And that's what a lot of companies like Sears and Montgomery Ward, for those of you who remember that, and J.C. Penney and these brick and mortar retailers said when Amazon started. Oh, they'll take a little bit, but we've been successful for 150 years, and we will be successful after this Silicon Valley startup is gone. And now most of them are gone. In the oil industry, we've been drilling this way for 100 years, and we'll outlast, no, we really won't. Because it's becoming harder, and it's becoming more dangerous, and it's becoming more analytical in how they value our organizations, and we have to lead with that transformation as well. And it all starts with getting the right data in the right people's hands that they can trust so they can do something with it. And so my last slide, I drew this one myself. It's a train, in case you didn't know. Years ago, when I was at SAP, I worked with a company, it was Valero, down in San Antonio. And I started working with Valero. Actually, when I was at Tenneco, I worked with Valero, but it was Valero gas transmission. A lot of people don't remember Valero was actually a gathering system. Bill Greehey sold the pipelines and bought 3 refineries from Basis Petroleum. And we started working with Valero in the late 90s when I was at SAP. And then they grew massively through acquisition. They would go buy refineries, a lot of them sour crude refineries. They go buy refineries, and they would come in, and they would have a 90-day cycle. They would buy the refinery. They wouldn't fire anybody. They never did any synergies of acquisitions through headcount reduction. They would come in, and the CIO at the time, well, there were 2 CIOs, they both did it during their time, were the ones that led those 90-day sprints in the refineries. They say, for the first 30 days we're doing this, next 30 days we're doing this, next 30 days we're doing that. At the end of it, 90 days you're going to be part of the Valero family. And we are a family, and we want you to be part of this family. And they always use this analogy. They said, the Valero train is coming through this refinery, which actually works because all the refineries have a train track through them, right? Valero train's coming through this refinery, and we want every one of you to get on this train with us for the rest of this journey. But if you don't want to, feel free to lay down in front of it. And they were like, I think I'm going to get on the train. You know, that'll be more comfortable. So who do we want to do business with? Who will we do business with as we go forward? Those that are on this train with us, right? Give us transparency into the data for the goods and services you're providing to us. Give us transparency into your supply chain. Collaborate with us on how we do it. Help us figure out how to get the right data to the right people at the right time. And maybe the discussion won't always be about cost. It'll be about value. But this train is coming through our industry. It's in the middle of it. And some of us have been, laying down in front of it for a while. So I would encourage all of you, get on board with it. Figure out how your company is being disrupted. Figure out how our industry is being disrupted. Figure out how you can make our life easier, which will therefore make your life easier, so we can move energy further down this path as we go forward. But that is my time. That's my message, and I really do appreciate it. Thank you very much.